Welcome to Lead Pods, the official leadership podcast from USMB for pastors and church leaders, where our goal is to increase our impact together.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 149 of the USMB Lead Pods. My name is Matt Ersman, and once again, as always, so glad to have you with me. So today I have the privilege and the honor of talking with Amy Jackson-Kincaid. Amy is the Guardian Ad Litem District Administrator in North Carolina. We'll get to that here in just a second. She's also an associate pastor at Boone Mennonite Church in North Carolina, and she's also on the USMB board. And Amy is extremely passionate and very knowledgeable all about foster care. So if you're like me, the title of Guardian Ad Litem might be new to you. Amy explains it better than I can, but they are basically a court-appointed advocate for kids who are in the foster care system. You may or may not be surprised to hear that there are between 300 and 400,000 kids in the U.S. in the foster care system, and it's obviously just a big problem, and a lot of those kids really deserve better treatment than what they're getting. Of course, every kid deserves a family, and at least in my opinion, this is one of those issues that really shouldn't be controversial or even political. The Bible's pretty clear how we're supposed to treat orphans and how we're supposed to love them. So maybe your heart will be stirred to get involved with foster care, or maybe get involved in this Ad Litem program. Or if not that, there are some really practical things that you and your church can do as well to help care for people in these families. So I loved getting to know Amy. There's some really great stuff here. I think you'll learn a lot, and I think your heart might break just a little bit when you hear some of these stories in a good way. There's things that we can all do to really help with this. So for much more, let's take a quick break to hear from this week's sponsor, and then we'll get to my conversation with Amy Jackson-Kincaid.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Mennonite Central Committee. This summer, join MCC's School Kit Challenge and help us collect 30,000 kits for kids around the world. School kit packing is a great way to nurture a love of learning in tomorrow's leaders and peacemakers. So plan ahead with your family, friends, Sunday school, or VBS to get packing by August 31st. Learn more at mcc.org/challenge.
All right, my friends, well, today I'm excited to introduce you to a new guest to Lead Pods and a very important topic that I'm really looking forward to diving into a little bit deeper today. So today we're joined by Amy Jackson-Kincaid. She is the District Administrator for the Guardian and Ad Litem Program in North Carolina. She's also an ordained minister and a chaplain there in North Carolina. And just a really important topic I'm excited to dive into. So Amy, thanks for making time for us today. It's great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be here and share.
Absolutely. So obviously this is the USMB podcast. And again, you might be a new name to some people. So I know you've got some MB background and roots, and you're involved at an MB church there in North Carolina. So you just start by introducing yourself a little bit more. Tell us about family, your church, any kind of background stuff before we get too far here.
Yeah, I'm Amy Jackson-Kincaid, and so I am ordained and serve as the associate pastor at Boone Mennonite Brethren Church up in Boone, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
I've been attending there for about right around 10 years, and just wanted to reconnect back with my heritage. My dad grew up in Avery County and had roots in the Beach Bottom Mennonite Brethren Church there.
Okay.
So my pastor is actually my second cousin.
Oh, okay.
So he started in that Beach Bottom church and then moved over to Boone. So I love worshiping in a little small church, little country church, mixed congregation, and we just love the Lord. Yeah, it's just I call it the authentic, true worship.
Yeah.
Experience.
Very cool. That's the best kind, right? So that's awesome.
Now I am blessed to also serve on the USMB board.
Mm-hmm.
So just really getting to learn more about the Mennonite Brethren and the history there too, being on that board.
Very cool. Well, thank you for serving on that team. That's really important. So kind of the main topic for today is foster care and what churches can do specifically to help with this. It's obviously a huge problem in America and something that I think a lot of people will care really deeply about, but they may not really know for sure what all they can do. And it's kind of a confusing system for those of us who don't know the ins and outs like you do. So first of all, how did you get into this? How long have you been involved in foster care work, and what kind of led you to get started there?
So I started back around 2002 a lady in my church was fostering, and she needed someone to provide respite care for her little boy she had placement of, and he had MS. And so I took the classes and just wanted to offer her 1 week in a month just to have a respite break. And boy, when I got licensed to be a foster parent, children started just rolling in my house because there was such a big need. And they, back then and today, have a shortage of foster homes. So once DSS removes the child and they put them in a safe environment, you have to be licensed to care for that child unless you're a relative placement. So I got licensed to foster, and I kept him that 1 week in a month, and then they started placing other children in my home. Those children had a guardian ad litem. So once there's court activity, they're appointed a guardian so to speak up for them in court. So those foster children had a guardian ad litem assigned to them. So I had 2 children that kind of aged out in my home once they turned 18. So I didn't foster anymore and decided to take the guardian ad litem volunteer training so that I could still help in some type of way. So that's what got me started. And then a position opened up, so I was able to apply and blessed to go into that role and now serve as the district administrator.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. So again, a lot of people probably don't have a lot of knowledge about how the foster care system works. And so people might know what a guardian ad litem is. Honestly, that was kind of new to me before I was kind of getting ready to talk to you. So if that's a new term for people, can you explain what responsibility is there?
I'll start at the basics of foster care.
Yeah, great.
So usually children enter foster care because of abuse, neglect, or dependency. So that is, someone will call a report in that they feel like a child is being abused or neglected, or that they're living on their own. DSS's responsibility, so the Department of Social Services, it's what it's called here in North Carolina, they're then obligated to investigate the report that's called in. If they find out that there is abuse, neglect, or dependency involved, then they file a petition with the court. And once the court is involved, he appoints a guardian ad litem for the case. In some states, it's called a CASA, a court-appointed special advocate. So depending on what state you are in, it's what they're referred to. But once the judge appoints that advocate for the child, they speak up on their best interest. So whereas the department serves the whole family, so they're offering the parents services to be able to reunify with their children, but the guardian ad litem or the CASA, they're there specifically for the child. So they find out what their needs may be. They investigate the whole case because they're making recommendations back to the court on whether the child should be reunified with their parents, whether they're in a safe foster home. So they're obligated to go see that child once a month just to make sure they're in a safe environment themselves, because we all watch the news. Some foster homes are not safe. And they make recommendations on whether that child may need special educational plans or medical plans, just about anything that's involved with the child. They speak up on their behalf. One thing we do is ask the child what their wishes is, if they're able to voice what their wish is. So they're able to tell us that. We explain to them, our job is to let the court know. We let the judge know what your wishes are. And mom and dad may have some homework they need to do before, because children, 9 times out of 10, regardless of the severity that brought them into foster care, they want to go home. They want to be reunified back with their parent. So we just let them know that, mom and dad may have some homework to do, and then the judge will allow them to connect.
I just the other day listened to a podcast about foster care, and they explained it in a way that was helpful to me, where they said that, at least in most states, probably all states, the goal is to keep a child with a family member if at all possible. So if the parents aren't fit or suit for whatever reason, they'll try to find another family member before they go into the foster care system. But I learned something new where a lot of times there's just this real tension where you want them to stay with the family, but sometimes the family is not safe. But in some instances, maybe less than ideal family situation is probably better than going into foster care. So when with your involvement, that sounds like a nearly impossible task to really gauge what's best for the child. So again, for those of us on the outside, can you talk about that a little bit, how those decisions get made?
Yeah, so before the child is removed, when DSS comes in to investigate and they feel like they need removal, the judge first has to approve that.
Okay.
Once he does, they give the parents the opportunity to name who they would like their children to go live with, and then DSS has to do background checks to make sure that placement is safe.
Okay.
So they'll investigate their home, run background criminal checks to make sure it's safe to place the child there. And if they're clear, they can place the child with relatives or friends.
Mm-hmm.
So they're given that opportunity. If they can't identify anyone, then they are placed in a foster home. So what we're seeing now that I've been here for a little while is a generational curse. So that's where you see there is no family to place them that's suitable.
Right.
Children that I had starting out 9 years ago, some of them now have children that we can't place back with. So,
right.
Yeah, you start seeing that trickling down scenario.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because, again, for a lot of times, again, I'm kind of referencing this podcast discussion I heard. A lot of times, unfortunately, what people might label as neglect could also be just a reality of poverty. If it's a single mom, she may have to work more hours and she may not be able to be with her kids as much as she or anyone else would like her to be. So again, to me, that just sounds like such a tricky thing where if it's a low-income family who the parents are just doing whatever they can to survive, to some people it might look like neglect. Is that true? How do you handle those kinds of cases?
Well, there has to be, most of the time with that, there has to be some type of abuse. So there's a case management part of it too. So if DS doesn't immediately call the court to be involved, they'll put the family in a case management type of situation to where they're offering services. So they're trying to help prevent it to get to the court necessity. So they'll work with the family, they'll offer them services, and that could last a year or more. They feel like they're just not making a difference. If they're providing services, trying to work and offer resources, and it's just not helping, then they'll get the court involved, and then the court will start ordering. He'll order mom and dad to get employment. He'll order them safe housing or for them to do drug screens and require so many positives before, they can even have visits. So, there's different levels. Usually if it's an immediate, that is immediate removal. But a lot of times they will offer case management to where they're offering resources to the family.
Okay. So if there's significant abuse, it might be a very quick pull out. We need to do something different here. But if it's something other than that, it sounds like it might be a longer process to try to find the best solution.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's funny. Just this morning, I was reading a devotion that I usually read. It's called Devotional Dailies, and today's was on adoption.
Oh, really?
Adopted into to Christ, and it gave numbers about adoption in our culture, and it said that over 400,000 children are in foster care in the United States.
Yeah.
And that in Los Angeles County alone, more than 100 children are brought into foster care every day.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
Every single day.
It's just it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And you and I chatted a couple weeks ago, Amy, and I just can't, your job is one of those, I don't know how you do it day to day, because I'm sure you see some really just heartbreaking things. Yeah. And
I attend a meeting that It used to be on Fridays. It's called MDT, Multidisciplinary Team, and it's where everyone involved in the scenario, we meet and talk about what is going on with those children, what we feel like collaboratively should happen to that child.
Mhm.
It was so heavy, it would ruin my whole weekend.
Oh, yeah.
So they changed it to Wednesday, and when we hired more staff in the office that I was in, we rotate attending just to give each other a break, because it's very hard situations to hear sometimes, and it can get you down.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And obviously all those 400,000 kids, they're all unique cases. So I don't even know if this is possible, but are there trends or is there a quote unquote normal pattern? Like for a kid who enters the foster care system, is it literally every single case is 100% unique, or are there some trends that you see of what these kids look like and what their lives look like?
Yeah. Right now, I cover 3 different counties, so we have a little over close to 600 children in the 3 counties that I oversee.
Okay.
And right now, the trend is substance abuse.
Okay.
So those children are coming in because they've tested positive, or parents are testing positive for substances. After COVID, we saw a rise in sex abuse cases, physical abuse. So it'll go up and down, or it'll weave in and out of the scenarios. But
yeah, if it's severe enough that they're in that system, it's probably pretty severe. So, well, so I guess again, we've all probably heard some news stories. There's portrayals in movies and things, but again, do you have any? I don't know if you know any stats for nationwide, and I'm sure state by state, county by county is so different. But as far as like how long the average kid's in foster care, you hear these stories about they've been in 12 different schools and 8 different families. Is there any kind of norm as far as that kind of thing is concerned?
In our state, in North Carolina, the parents are given a year to work a case plan, that once court is involved, to reunify back with their child. Usually around that year mark is when we'll start asking the court to change the plan it always starts out with a primary plan of reunification. When it gets closer to that year mark and there hasn't been any progress made on them working their case plan, we'll ask the court to flip the plan to adoption.
Okay.
So once it flips and the primary plan is adoption, there has to be a termination of parental rights petition filed with the court within 6 months.
Okay.
And so parents can still try to work their plans up until that termination hearing. But once that's filed and we go to court for it, their rights can be terminated. A lot of times, if they're in relative placements, they can grant those relatives guardianship. And parents they still have an opportunity. They can come back after guardianship is granted and ask the court to restore their custody. But they would have to prove that they're in a safe, stable place to regain that. But adoption is more final. Once termination happens and the child is adopted, that's usually final, unless for some reason those adoptive parents, there's concerns with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in your area, again, I'm sure every case is so unique, but do a majority of kids end up getting adopted, like I don't know if the right term is, permanently adopted, or I'm sure there are kids that stay until they do you have any?
As a matter of fact, I'm covering 2 children right now that have been in foster care pretty much the whole time I've been working this position. So about 7 years they've been in foster care, and we just have not found the right home, the right adoptive home for them. Some children age out. So when they turn 18, and that's a lot of my children when I first started, they're now turning 18, so they're aging out. They have transitional living homes so that they can stay there from 18 to 21 and still receive assistance. So a lot of times they will choose to stay in one of those homes, but I've
Okay.
seen some age out and have nowhere to go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And is that just a sheer numbers thing? Is there we just need more foster families everywhere, or what else?
Yeah.
What's the solution to this?
Yes. We need more foster homes. We need more awareness. I don't think a lot of times, even after working in this position for 9 years, a lot of people are like, I've never heard of a Guardian Ad Litem before.
Right, right.
And I didn't either before I started doing foster care, and one started coming to my home. So we just need awareness. The movie Sound of Hope was a great resource. We used that movie a lot to do some recruitment, asking churches if we could come in, show the movie, and then have a panel or discussion around what fostering looks like.
Yeah.
That movie give you a raw look at what fostering to adopt can be. The children they're not easy. They've been through a lot of trauma. They've
Yeah.
experienced a lot of trauma. Even some newborns
Mm.
that we see that come into foster care right from the hospital.
Yeah.
They have substance abuse or alcohol syndrome.
Yeah.
They go through withdrawals, and that lives in their little systems for a long time that we have to try to deal with later on in life.
Yeah. I know you mentioned Sound of Hope, and I'm sorry to say I haven't seen it. Can you give us just a synopsis? What is it about? And I'm sure it'd be a great place if someone wants to start somewhere. Maybe that's a good place to start. Can you tell us?
Yeah, it's on Angel Studios.
Mm-hmm.
Sound of Hope is a story in southern Texas called a town called Possum Trot. And there's a pastor there, and his wife tells him the Lord has told her they need to foster children. And he's like, I'm not so sure I heard the Lord say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they go all in. It's a little church, and I think everyone in the church ends up opening up their homes to foster to where they have no foster children in the system. So, back to the lack of foster homes, if those children don't have a home to go to, they sometimes sleep at the department. So they sleep in the building at social services.
Yeah.
And the one here doesn't have bedrooms. It doesn't have beds or showers. So they sleep on the sofa or in the floor on the cot. And here they go take showers at our Planet Fitness or one of the other gyms.
Yep. Well, you mentioned that virtually every child who's in this system is coming from something horrible, and so these kids they're difficult. And so if you're talking to potential foster or adoptive parents, what do you say to them, and how do you encourage them to get involved, but not sugarcoat it to where they are kind of getting a rude awakening when the kid shows up in their home? How do you kind of balance those things?
So as a team, we formed a little team here in our in Burke County to start raising awareness of the need for foster homes. And so we all went first and watched the movie. And so afterwards we had a discussion like, I don't think this is going to be a good recruitment tool at all.
Oh, really? Okay.
Because it shows the reality of how
hard it is.
Yes. And how some of the children are just going to be difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, love won. So the pastor and his wife wanted to send the kid back. And then they just toughed it out together, and they found out that love would conquer. So they just decided that they were not going to give up. They were just going to love these children. And those children at the end, it shows where they are today and how, they made it. They were successful. But so I think just knowing that it's not always going to be easy. One of the supervisors in one of my office, he adopted 3 children, and it's not always easy. Just like with your own children.
Right.
We're going to go through different struggles, but you have to make the decision that this is what the Lord's called me to do. Actually, he commands us to do.
Yeah.
To love the orphans and those that are not lovable.
Right.
So just make that decision that I'm going to embrace this. I'm going to love them. I'm going to provide a home to the best of my ability, what the Lord would have me to do.
Yeah. Well, can you give us a little bit more of a peek of just what this reality looks like? So if someone signs up to be a foster parent, obviously there'd be a lot of training and things they'd learn along the ways, but are you signing up for, okay, I'm gonna, let's say, well, not adoption yet, but fostering. I'll take this kid for X amount of weeks, months, years, or is it case by case? Or because I imagine there's some maybe confusion, maybe even misinformation about what exactly you're signing up for. So what does kind of an average foster stay look like, if there is such thing as an average?
So they would go through foster training. There's so many hours of training that they have to do to be licensed. Their home has to meet a certain code. So the fire department would come in and make sure everything was safe there. And then they would be on a track. Either they could tell their licensing agent, like, I'm fostering to adopt a child.
Okay.
Or I'm only fostering. I'm not considering adoption. I just want to foster. And a lot of our older foster parents, that's the track that they're on. They just want a bed and love to the child, but they wouldn't want to adopt. So you can let your licensing agent know which track you would be on, whether you're there to adopt a child or you just want to foster.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things, like, it just has to be so difficult, so heart-wrenching, because of course every child wants to be adopted, right? So I imagine some parents are like, man, fostering sounds great, but I don't know if my heart could handle
It's very tough. I had children. I had children in my home that I just didn't want to give up on. As difficult as they were, I had 2 of my own children, and I remember one, he was so difficult. And I remember my little girl, she was probably like, she said, "Mommy, send them back." I was like, we can't send them back. I was like, they need a home, and it was hard. It was hard to make the call to my case manager and say, I just don't think it's a good fit.
Yeah.
I mean, I struggled and I cried and I prayed about it, but I had to make that decision. It just thought he would receive better care and with someone else that could just focus on him.
Yeah.
And I stayed connected to him. I always checked on him. And even as an adult, try to see where he's at and what's going on. But some children you just can't, and you have to make that decision.
Yeah. I've heard a kind of an interesting argument that obviously I know there's a lot of government involvement in these cases. And so there's kind of like, how much should the government be involved in, all that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, a lot of kids who are in foster care, again, I'm sure you know the stats more than I do, but unfortunately, a lot of them end up and not all, but some end up in prison. There's a path to crime. Like you said, it's kind of generational. If they were raised in a situation like this, it's not uncommon for them to have that same thing happen in their family. So I've kind of heard this argument that it would be in the government's best interest to really work on this just simply a cost basis. There's a chance that prison and crime and all of that would go down if we really amp up our foster care system. If we really invest in it, it would actually pay off in the long run because we're investing in our own societies. I'm sure that's not a unique idea. Is that kind of being talked about on the government level?
Yeah, the children are, they're offered that assistance once they get out. They pretty much could, go to college for free.
Really?
So it's based on them. And when we're recruiting for Guardian Ad Litem volunteers, we tell the volunteers, the children that have a volunteer assigned, not a staff, but a volunteer assigned, usually have better outcomes because they can just take one case, one child, and they're able to focus. I have one volunteer, she loves teenagers. So she'll take the teens and she'll really mentor and give them direction. They know they can call her. Even after they turn 18, they'll call her and ask her for advice. She'll meet them for dinner and, just try to steer them in the right direction and get them on a good path. So it's possible.
Yeah.
It's possible if they'll choose to make the right decisions, just like our own children.
Sure. Exactly.
Yes, they have to make the choice. It's our duty to guide them.
Yeah.
And I'm extra thankful for her that she loves and will take on those teenagers. And
Mm-hmm.
she has made a huge difference in so many of their lives.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've heard it just from what you said so far, and just even your experience being ordained as a reverend, like your faith drives you, and I can tell that. So what, you talk about that a little bit more, and especially maybe as we transition to talking about churches and how churches can be involved. You mentioned your devotional, and there's obviously a handful of scriptures that we all know that God clearly has a heart for the orphan. So can you just talk about that from your faith? Just expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I was working as a paralegal for a criminal defense attorney and had been doing that for like 17 years. And I knew that the Lord had more for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just started praying and I said, God, what is it that you would have me do? Where can I serve you?
Mm-hmm.
And so I had already signed up to be a volunteer with the Guardian Ad Litem, and I fell and I broke my ankle. And so I was laid up. I couldn't walk. I had to have surgery. And I just started remembering I had worked while I was in school. I had worked in the emergency department at the hospital. And when I had to call the chaplain when someone passed away, I just kept noticing how the atmosphere would change when she got there, and she would pray and talk with the families. And so the Lord just put that in my spirit. I started investigating how do you become a chaplain?
Mm-hmm.
I signed up to get my master's in divinity, and I just really, really was trusting God and just by faith knowing that he was going to open a door where he wanted me to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I had prayed that they would call me. It wasn't a job that I would have to put in an application for, that I would have to pursue. They would pursue me.
Okay.
And so the district administrator at that time in our program, she called me and asked me if I wanted to take an opening.
Wow.
And I remember being in tears like, God, I can't believe you actually had them call me.
Yeah.
You are in the fine details of this.
Yep.
And so that is my story. And I know even on the worst days, this is where the Lord would have me be. Even on those Fridays where you hear so much that you cannot hear anymore.
Mm-hmm.
When you come home and you sit and stare at the wall or out the window on things that you've seen or heard, you pray.
Yeah.
And ask God to help you. Where, you allowed me to be here now. What is it that you would have me to do? And just like this devotion that I quoted is dated today.
Mm-hmm.
He'll show you what you need to see.
Yeah. Yeah.
He'll give you what you need.
Yeah.
To live on. And I just trust him. I trust him every single day that he will lead and guide and direct on where I should be, who I should speak to, or the children to love on. And when you go visit and they wrap their arms around you and they're excited that you're there to see them, you're their person. I'll never forget two young boys that I had. They didn't mind me come visiting them at school, and they would tell their friend, she's our person.
Yeah.
That makes you feel good. So they knew that I was their person. I was there on their behalf, and that I would speak up for them.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, I'm really glad you talked about that, because I'm sure there is so many hard things and hard days, but I imagine that there's also a whole lot of joy and a very rewarding experience to see some of those things to come to fruition. So there's kind of this term, I think we've talked about it before on the podcast, but just this idea of compassion fatigue, where I think most people listening right now genuinely care about this. Like it's a horrible problem that I think everyone acknowledges that this is not how things should be. Of course, kids should have families, and yes, we should do whatever we can to help them. And then it's just also true that a lot of people have their own families. A lot of them aren't great either. We're all busy with work and church and school, and honestly, the world's just kind of a dark place right now. So if you're talking to a family who is like, man, I would love to help with this, but honestly, I'm kind of aching in my own personal life, and I don't know if I can take on anymore. Like, how do you talk to people in that situation?
So after we showed the movie, we set a panel up and allowed the members at the church to ask questions. And there's all different avenues if you want to be involved that you could help. You could provide a meal to a foster family. So there's an agency here called Big House Families, and that's what they do. They come in, the church members come in and support foster families, and a lot of them are in their church or in other churches, but they'll go over and cut the grass or provide a meal, whatever they can do to help support that foster family so that they can continue fostering. There's a church here where the children, most of the time when the department shows up to remove them, they have to put clothes in a black trash bag.
Yeah.
So this church provides duffel bags with necessities, a toothbrush, so whatever they need in that duffel bag, so that when they get to their placement, they'll have the basic essentials. So you could do that. There's another agency called Fostering Hope. So they take in donations for diapers, bottles, cribs, car seats. A lot of families, they don't have those things, or they may want to do it, but they don't have those necessities for that child to come today.
Right.
So they'll provide everything they need.
Yep.
So that could be a ministry, in your church. And that's where those needs are supplied. There at the church. I'll call Leanna up and say, hey, do you have a car seat? I have a family that needs a car seat. She was like, sure. Yeah. What time can you meet?
Yeah.
So there's all different ways to get involved. I could talk about this for an hour.
Yeah, no. Well, maybe that's kind of my next question, because I know, so I live in Wichita, and so I know there's a handful of ministries or organizations that help foster care families, but it seems to me like they're all pretty local. Like there's a handful of ministries in Wichita, and there's a handful of ministries in North Carolina. So is there kind of an overarching body that kind of oversees it around the country, or do you have to just look for your city and try to find what's available in your city? Is that how it kind of works?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know of anything that like national.
Okay.
But yeah, I know probably I couldn't imagine each county or city not having some type of ministry there. And if they don't, I think it's important for someone to look into to help provide. I visited Wichita last year, and I wondered what the foster care rate would be there. Not sure I ever got an answer to it, but
okay. Well, again, there's great ministries doing good work, but I wonder if that's part of this. Is it's hard to know for the average person know where to turn. So I guess it's kind of on us to do some research, and that's great. We can all handle that. We know how to Google things.
Sure. Yeah. And just start in your local church.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. So speaking of that, so most of our listeners are either pastors or church leaders of some kind. So what else do you want them to know about foster care in general, or your work, or what else haven't we talked about that you want to make sure that church leaders really understand?
I just think missions is so important. Just finding local missions as well as abroad. You don't have to look far to find something good to do.
Yeah.
So that would be my commission, is to just look and see what is the need. There's a church nearby in one of the other counties, and they had their members, they passed out note cards, and they asked the members, what are your 3 top concerns right now? And they had them all, turn their cards in, and the top 3 were food insecurities, homelessness, and I forget the third. But out of that, I'm sorry, out of that, they had a panel night. And so the police officers came to talk about homelessness, all these different agencies that serve their top 3 concerns, so that they could educate them on what was happening in those areas. So that would be an idea.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
You're hearing from your congregation what their concerns are, and then you're addressing those to see how the church can help or how individually they can get involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Well, especially in our world where politics is just so gross and divided, this is one issue the Bible's really clear. We're supposed to take care of these kids. And so that's, to me, hopefully this is something that churches can unify around, because it's clear what the right thing to do is.
It is. It is. I was reading James 1:27, and I had wrote over in the margin that it's pure religion. I don't know if that was their topic, and that's why I wrote it. But my footnote says to be transformed into the image of Christ means to increasingly reflect his loving compassion, character in our own behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
If we're not becoming more loving toward others, especially the most helpless of our society, we have taken the wrong turn somewhere.
Yep. I
can't see where children could be left out of that. Yeah.
Well, Amy, again, I'm sure you have some very difficult days, hopefully some really good days too, but I know you have some hard days. So thank you for the good work that you're doing and for your leadership at your church and USMB. Really grateful for you. And I guess before we close out, anything else you want to wrap up with?
No, I'm thankful for the opportunity, always willing to share and just bring more awareness to the foster care system. And I know that it's not anything hidden, even in the smallest little town. So people just being aware, everyone's a mandated reporter. I think that is a nationwide law that everyone is mandated to report abuse, neglect, or dependency for children. So just for everyone to just look to see if there's a need and then take action.
Yep. I agree. I mean, thanks again for your great work. Thanks for being generous with your time today. I've learned a lot, and I think our audience has too. So thank you for doing this. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We've been talking about our summer gathering in Salt Lake City, but there's a bigger story behind why we come together. In the March-April Christian Leader, explore the vision and purpose that shape these gatherings. Along with contributions from our featured speakers, let's grow in what it means to follow Jesus in community. Start reading at christianleadermag.com.
Well, Amy, one more time, I just want to thank you so much for your hard work. I know I just can't imagine some of the super hard days that Amy and her colleagues have to go through on a regular basis, but this work is so important. And a couple of times we kind of referenced, but we didn't actually spell out James 1:27. So if that verse sounds familiar, but you couldn't remember, let me just remind you. James wrote, "Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress." So again, I don't think each and every single one of us is called to be a foster parent necessarily, but this is one of those things where if all of our churches chip in, I think we can make a real impact. So I do encourage you to look into what your area, what your city, what your zip code does to help these families. Maybe see if there's something that your church could do. I'd love it if our churches could come together and help with this. I do encourage you to check out that Sound of Hope movie. It sounds like that'd be a great first step for a lot of us, maybe some of our churches. So check that out. Do some Googling to see what's available in your area. And let's see if we can live out that James 1:27 verse. So one more time, thanks again to Amy. Thanks again to you for listening. I know a bunch of you, if you are a pastor or a church leader, you're probably like me and you're scrambling to put the final touches on your Good Friday and Easter services. So I hope it's just a really great weekend for you and your churches. Find some time to breathe next week when those services are behind you. But hope you have a really great Easter weekend and a great week ahead. And I'll look forward to seeing you next time here on Lead Pods.
Thanks for listening to Lead Pods. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing to our show wherever you're listening today. Learn more by visiting usmb.org and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll see you next time as we learn more practical tools to increase our impact together.